And I stood up in the room and I said, you should not do advertising. You know, the Dutch they have this really funny sense of humor. So I stood up in the meeting with this whole board from Heineken and I said, you shouldn't do advertising. Advertising's dead. You need a movement. And then the CEO stood up and said, you mean a bowel movement?
This is the Snarketing Podcast. For marketers by marketers. Talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Hello all, this is the Snarketing Podcast. You are our listeners. We are the co-hosts, Matt Wurst.
Valerie Vespa.
Still the same co-hosts. We've not added or subtracted anyone in 3.5 years, which, you know, given the state of marketing and the turnover that happens with roles, I just saw someone who left for a new job after 11 months as a CMO somewhere. Like, we have real staying power. So good for us.
Well, thankfully, I really like you, Matt.
That makes one of you. So thank you for being my only fan. Although my OnlyFans account has a lot more followers.
Oh my
Just kidding. Just kidding. I will never admit that that was true.
So we have two guests on, and when you have two guests, I feel like things become elongated.
Are you stressing out about it?
You know what? We don't do this often, and I do get a little worried because I want to make sure everyone has equal amounts of time to say things. And I don't know.
They're
I
not
get
political
in my head.
candidates.
I know. I feel like that's what I'm a political journalist today.
All right. Well, here's what we'll do. I will be traffic cop, and you be just the person who sits at the intersection begging for money when they're at a red light. You want to do that?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect roles. We've just established for ourselves in this conversation. In somewhat seriousness, though, as we introduce Scott, who is a Hall of Fame founder in the agency and marketing landscape,
Incredible
who has
person.
transitioned his company to a new CEO. He became chairman, and Steve is now the CEO. That's an interesting dynamic that not many companies figure out right away, but sounds like they're crushing it. So let's figure out how,
Wonderful.
where, why, and when, and with whom, and other questions that we'll figure out as we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
This episode of the Snarketing Podcast has all of the makings of a blockbuster, big ideas, big names, and 4 people trying not to talk at once. In this rare 2-for-1, we'll have Scott Goodson, founder and now chairman of StrawberryFrog, and Steve Scutellaro, the agency's new CEO. One built the place over 27 years. The other just took the wheel. Talk about an interesting pair, so let's see how this goes. Matt and Valerie get into the transition, the AI investment, and what's next.
We can count ourselves in, we can count ourselves out. As long as we can count on each other to make this podcast great, I'm excited to jump in. So here we go, Scott and Steve, Steve and Scott, StrawberryFrog, a lot of S's. We're going to have an alliteratively good time today. Welcome to the podcast to you both.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. Yeah, thank you.
You've hit the bottom of the barrel. You've hit the bottom of the barrel with us too. You know that, right?
I don't think that's true. I think the cream rises to the top. I've never really tested that in barrels. But when it comes to kegs, certainly the foam rises to the top. So I have that kind of experience.
We say, what are we churning butter over here? Is that what the metaphor is? I think? Yeah.
We're definitely making something, and we'll see how long it lasts. Whether it ages like a fine wine or whether it goes stale pretty quickly. But I'm excited to talk with you guys because, look, if we're going to go back to college years, I was in college when StrawberryFrog was first launched, and I didn't know it at the time because who knew what an agency was when I was in college. But you're now 26, 27 years old.
Almost 30. Believe it.
I mean,
That dates
you're
you.
like you're a full-fledged adult at this point. You better be starting to earn your own income and not living off your parents. And I know you are, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, as someone who spent many years in the agency game, I have seen a lot of things, but the fact that you guys were and still are not only building innovative ways to support clients, but also lead the way creatively, still after all these years, is incredible. But Scott, you earlier this year, you moved into a different role. So I kind of want to work a little bit backwards, because when you go from a CEO to a chairman, and Steve, you've stepped in, and I wouldn't just say stepped in, you've kind of hit the ground running. But for anyone who hasn't followed the news, what changed on a Monday morning back in February?
Well, we started listening to Britney Spears' Baby, Baby One More Time, which basically was launched the same year that we started StrawberryFrog. So it's not that long ago.
That feels timely for me still.
Right? Do you remember that song? That's how old we are.
Of course. I think I sang at karaoke at least a dozen times in the 90s, the late 90s.
But to answer your question, basically, Steve took over the CEO role, and he makes all the hard calls now.
And it was a slow transition, though. To your point of Monday morning, things changing. It wasn't quite a switch like that. I had joined StrawberryFrog in the fall of 24. And so that gave Scott and I a pretty good opportunity to understand each other a bit more, mostly learning how we communicate, because I think what I've seen of the transition and of the good and the bad of it, it mostly comes down to communication and communication styles. So we had a nice window of almost a year or so getting to know each other, learning each other's styles before Scott came to me and said, hey, listen, I think I'm ready. I know you're ready. So why don't we do this? And it's been a fun adventure through that transition to really understand and manage Scott to some degree, because he's been great as he slid into more of like a coach role and a mentor role for me on a day-to-day basis. But this will always be his baby, his 27-year-old baby. So, for me, it's about making sure that he knows what that baby is up to at the right times and moments. But really, it's been great that I've got full autonomy in the seat in the role right now, too.
I think of StrawberryFrog as what was probably the first real new 2.0 agency that I can think of and remember, right? After 50 years of the same kind of big global agency model, and you guys probably worked at them, I worked at them, but were you setting out, Scott, at that point to be different, to create a different model? Like, what were the goals at the time when you first put that name off over the door?
So Steve has inherent in him a really key thing that I think is critical to running a company. He's, has all the credentials. He's worked at the top agencies. He's worked on the most interesting clients. He has a great bedside manner. He has all those elements that, are valuable. But in addition to that, and probably most importantly, he understands what it means to be constantly challenging the status quo, reimagining a company. Getting to where we are today is not going to get us where we are in 5 years. So what I love most about him is that burning desire to reinvent. And that was really what this company was about when we started. I had a weird beginning. I actually grew up in Canada and then moved to Sweden and lived in Stockholm for pretty much the back end of the 80s and to the 90s. And I launched the Ericsson mobile phone globally. And at the time, Sweden was probably a good decade ahead of the US in terms of technology, use of the internet. And we were doing like websites before I think the first websites were even done. And so there was like an understanding of how technology was going to completely eclipse the traditional, when you think about a good agency, what's a good agency? When someone asks you, what's a good agency? How many people work at your agency? Who gives a damn? Like, people are talking today that the first $1 billion company is going to be run by one person. So you can reimagine a company around all the changes that are happening in a good way, both that's good for clients and good for the agency. And that's what we did 20 X number of years ago. And back then, we did something that no one else in the world did. Actually, I think we did two things. One was we said we're going to outsource all the non-core people inside the company. We're going to work with independent freelance people and companies. And the first client, one of the first clients we won was we did the launch of Elle, Elle magazine,
Of course.
their website. First in the US, then we did and it's a French company. It's Hachette. So we did the US, then we did China. We had all these weird markets, including the US. And it was me, and that was it. I had studios and creatives in Australia, New Zealand, San Francisco, London, Amsterdam. And it was like a 24-hour thing where...
And you were an agent, not an agency, although you were an agency. Yeah.
Well, that's ultimately what the genesis of that word is, right? You're an agent. It's the same word. So bang, good point. And so that was it, the first big innovation, which I would say probably we're still doing. And secondly, was this idea that advertising was irrelevant. It was this new idea we had called creating movements for brands, that we could distill the principles of societal movements and use that, which is probably the most powerful way of motivating people to do something in the history of humanity. So
do you mind explaining? Yeah, do you mind explaining to the listeners like what exactly you mean by that a little bit more deeply?
So movement marketing was something we came up with when we started the agency in the late 90s. And the basic idea was that we, instead of taking a product and coming up with a really cool creative idea and buying media and pushing that creative out, and hopefully people see that and go, oh yeah, that's cool. Instead of that, first find out what people care about, and then crystallize that into a big idea, a big emotional idea, and then use that to generate sort of a community of people, that passionate advocates who want to be part of that. And then through a whole bunch of different types of actions, get them to basically help fuel, spread, and deepen that movement. And, the first client we had at StrawberryFrog when we started in 99 was the launch of the Mercedes-Benz smart car, which we launched in Europe. That was the first market. It wasn't the US. And we came up with a movement called Reduce to the Max, which was this idea of reinventing the urban environment and solving all the crap that we still deal with. No parking, traffic, rental car companies, parking lots full of cars on weekends that nobody uses. Then we created this movement of reinventing the urban environment. So instead of launching a 2-seater vehicle with a really cool TV spot, we created a movement where we brought together city officials, mayor's offices, rental car companies, all different people who had the same common interest to solve these bigger issues. And that fueled a whole cooler way of engaging all different types of stakeholders, including customers. So that's it. I'll shut up now.
No, so it's like thinking it's beyond a campaign. It's actually, it has a direction and it has a consortium, and there are a lot of different components to it than what would have gone into a traditional sort of plan.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a commercial if you want, but that's in the service of a movement.
Right.
You can, and these days, you can't, with the world the way it is and social media, you can't even as a CEO or a leader stand up in a big company anymore and mandate people to do anything. So we even say inside big corporations, you almost need a movement, eclipses a mandate, because people want to do something because we all want to do it because it's important to all of us. That's the way we think today.
So Steve, if you were to, now that you're holding the torch now, like how do you translate movement marketing into today's world, and how do you kind of see it exist with the brands that you work with and how you're pitching it out for big ideas?
Sure, yeah. So I think the crux of what has always made movement marketing special is the ability to galvanize people around one, a shared belief, and two, most importantly, for many of our clients, taking action. And I think what Scott has proved for so many years is that this idea of finding some type of purpose, and I know that can be a loaded word when you talk about purpose with a capital P.
Well, you literally wrote a book on it. I own it. I've read it. So you can at least claim ownership of it.
That's
even
right.
if it's been
That's right.
bastardized by somebody.
Correct.
Lots of people.
Purpose and profit are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's the model that Strawberry Frog has proved for almost 30 years. So the crux of finding something resonant in culture that people believe to be true. Sometimes it has been articulated previously and we ride that wave. And sometimes we need to put words to what hasn't quite been articulated yet. And I think that's really where the magic happens. And so as you look around our clients, which are pretty broad ranging, from big banks like Truist or Four Leaf Credit Union to some of the largest hospital networks like Northwell, RWJ Barnabas, to complicated and complex global clients like Infosys and John Deere, a new one. So what we find is that movements have a way of making the complex very simple. And also allowing people to participate. So it's been fun to modernize that lens, especially as we think about, okay, what does that mean for TikTok? How do people participate and engage in modern channels? Or how do we unlock the idea of this movement or this purpose with the modern tools that are available to us, whether that's generative AI, strategies, et cetera?
So much of what Gen AI is as a promise and a hope is still promise, because the technology is built on things that look backwards, but you're leading a business in an industry that needs to be looking forward.
I was just saying, not just the industry. I mean, clients, when Gen AI came out, clients were like, and CEOs are like, let's just put everything on hold for 5 years. Meanwhile, some people that aren't putting on hold are winning and gaining share and growing. So that's insane. Like Gen AI is going to happen, or when it happens, it happens. You've got to still market. You still need to be smart. You still need to transform your old boring company that's falling apart. So that isn't stopping. You still have to do that.
So does Gen AI then make movements easier to execute? I'm guessing from an efficiency perspective, or does it also in some ways threaten the thing that makes a movement work, which is the fact that it has to feel human and culturally connect and authenticity?
I mean, look at politics.
Well,
Look around you. It's in everywhere. I mean, come on. In every facet of our lives, we are shaped by movements. Having said that, we don't just do movements. We do, Steve has brought a really great lens to this, so it's a bit broader. And I think that's important too, because not every client wants a movement or deserves a movement. And some clients need something else.
It would be great to understand a particular example you're proud of as of late that kind of speaks to this. Do you have any that you'd love to share, Steve?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I mentioned Four Leaf Federal Credit Union, a client of ours out of Long Island. So we actually renamed and rebranded that organization. Previously, they were Bethpage Federal Credit Union, and they wanted to grow out of the local name and local roots that they had, as they have a national charter that not many credit unions do. And so, of course, we needed to grow and defend Long Island and the greater sort of New York DMA that they had been known for. But as part of our growth strategy and acquisition strategy, we wanted to attract women nationally into the credit union. So, and the CEO is a woman by the name of Linda, who is just an absolute force within that organization and really believed of the role and power of women in finance. So we know that women are going to be inheriting so much of this great wealth transfer that's upcoming, and their role within the boardroom or the financial decisions that are happening at home are growing. And not only that, but they are shown to be statistically better at managing money in so many regards. So we created a movement called Money Like a Woman that celebrated and empowered women to continue doing what they are so good at, but maybe don't always have the confidence to do. So we're creating new tools and ways to engage with the credit union that bring some of those strengths to light. We're doing messaging that tries to highlight some of those strengths. And we're really taking action, building products. You talked about generative AI. We're building an AI-powered financial companion that's specifically trained on some of the data that Four Leaf has and other topics that are most relevant to women that can serve as a companion in their pocket to help them with decisions, big and small, on a day-to-day basis. So Money Like a Woman is definitely one that we're proud of, and that's continuing to grow year after year for them as well.
Over the past year, Steve, since you've kind of, I guess, grown into and taken that torch, as Valerie alluded to, I don't love the word transformation because I think that word is overused, but StrawberryFrog has continued to and sweeping the Clios, and there are pencils happening since you joined. Media is growing. You're winning business. Your website is just littered with new and wins and new customers and clients. As even an AI agency of record, I think I saw. I don't know what that means yet, but are there numbers, wins, awards that matter more as a signal of health, growth, change, evolution?
Yeah, I think, listen, I'll drop the first frog pun on you here today, but the idea of metamorphosis, I think, is really what drives us as an agency to continue to evolve. And I think that's what makes us so good at helping our clients evolve too, because we're sort of in a constant state of change and looking forward, as Scott had said. So to me, honestly, when you look at the fact that AI is going to create this new tool that everyone has access to, right? We need to be creating an environment where we have the best practitioners. And I think tale as old as time, agency world is a business that's built on having the best people. So I think the finances are great and the wins are great, but the metric that keeps me up at night is the biannual survey that we do of all of our people that says, would you recommend working at StrawberryFrog to a friend? Do you enjoy working here? Are you clear on the mission? Are you clear on the direction? And do you feel valued and important? So I think, to me, culture has been the number one priority to protect and grow and just create an environment where good people who want to make good work are gonna want to work.
Scott, from like this founder to chairman transition, when you hear Steve talking about culture, it's something that's notoriously hard to get right. A lot of agencies say, step back and mean you're still in every meeting. So what do you have veto power over? What does Steve get to, say back off? And when have you guys figured that out? Is it all worked through, or are there still occasional moments of, I wouldn't call it messiness because it's, that's natural, but I want to get behind the curtain a little bit and see how that actually works.
Steve has a team of people around him who he trusts, and I trust Steve, and he and I we do a weekly call. I say more often than not, it's your call. I see myself, if anything, up on the crow's nest and not with the ship steering wheel in my hands. That's him. That's his role. So I'm very careful not to, step into that role. I work hard to earn his trust as much as he works to earn my trust. And It's a look running a high moving, super intelligent, very sensitive organization like ours takes an exceptional leader. And Steve has a lot of all those qualities. And I think, um, look, nobody's perfect and stuff happens. And in those situations, my job is to say, it's cool. It'll be fine. It's all good. Um, you know, there are occasionally things that I intuitively, when been in the business a long time, like I have, you just things or see. Um, so I will occasionally sort of indirectly mention some stuff, but I think honestly, it's a very healthy conversation, and I think it's the only way to work. Look, if a person who's run a business steps back, gives another individual the opportunity to lead it, and then that other person comes in and tells them what to do, that's that's not a job, and no person's going to remain in that role,
Right.
and vice versa. If Steve and I didn't have good communication, and I don't mean like every day, I mean like once a week or just touching base, to me those are really important uh, aspects.
The commitment that I think I had to make to myself and to Scott early on was that the bad news would travel just as quickly as the good news. It's very easy to manage up in that sense, and want to evangelize all of the amazing stuff that happens. But this is it can be a messy business at times, and we're moving fast. And as Scott said, we still have a very large network of people and freelancers and independent companies and contractors who are helping us power this engine. And so, I've got to make sure that he is fully aware of the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly in terms of this business. But the good news has been that, it's been more bright spots than dark spots. So, we believe that that's going to continue, and hopefully the hard conversations are never that hard.
It sounds great. The one question I have for you, that you mentioned freelancers. There's obviously been over the last, like, I don't know, probably 10 years, like a transition to a lot of people preferring freelancing over, full time in the office type of work. So can you elaborate on like how that's changed over the course of 30 said years, and has it gotten a lot easier to retain like really strong talent?
I mean, the core people in the company are full-time people.
Okay.
Around Steve are, strategic, brilliant strategic people. You've got terrific, I think some of the smartest strategic people in the industry. You've got very progressive thinking and innovative thinking, business leaders. We have two chief creative officers because the clients we work with, they want to have access to the top. Nobody today wants to work. The dirty secret of the old model was you had three adults and 700,000 14-year-olds. And, that's not what clients are going to trust their careers on. So today, they have access to Steve puts his team together, they do the work. And then around that, it's a bit like SKG DreamWorks or how great universities doing research work. You pull in a great actor who does a scene and then he's gone. We don't need the actor to be fully employed. It's not like it was during Keystone Cops time when everybody was a full-time employee.
Yeah.
Now,
Studio actors. Yeah.
I think the market just continues to ebb and flow, and you've got to be really in tune with that. So we've got basically a full-time resource manager whose job it is to constantly have a pulse and understanding of the market, to identify the best talent and know who, how, where, and when to pull them in, and optimizing the rates and the project durations and the engagements. So it's a complex network.
As someone who managed resources at a growing agency for at least a few years back in the day, I think what you're doing and what you've done is smart, because the opposite of what, Scott, you were saying is probably going to become more increasingly true as AI replaces more of the junior roles, at least to start, where you may have 200 experienced managers and only 3 people at the bottom, right? And that model's not going to work. And we're seeing it, right? Real consolidation is happening with certain bigger holding companies. There's real independence happening with certain, I wouldn't say startup agencies, but maybe more the indie agencies. StrawberryFrog has stayed independent for 27 years on purpose, lowercase p. What's the actual business case for staying independent in 2026? Is it that flexibility, that nimble agility?
I think the speed is definitely part of it. And Scott, I want to hear your perspective too. The other thing that I think differentiates us now, and obviously, you know, we get to put our people and our clients and the work above profits, which I think is great. But so much of the agency model, especially when you talk about those big holdcos, are just smoke and mirrors trying to hold on to more client dollars than they're actually admitting to, selling nonsense black box solutions or siphoning media dollars to this little thing that they own that you might not have known about that doesn't really show up on the media plan. And what we get to do as an independent agency is stay agnostic. We're not going to sell you bullshit because it improves our bottom line. We're going to sell you an outcome. We want to identify where you want to take the brand, what the KPIs are, and get you there in whatever way or with whatever tools and platforms it takes.
Can I just say, by the way, Scott, before you answer, Steve, I want that to be in the next time you guys win the Ad Age Small Agency of the Year award. I want that to be your acceptance speech. Shed the light on it.
I think that was his accepting speech.
Okay. I wasn't invited to the last award that you guys won. You keep winning awards, so you have to mix it up at some point.
Well, actually, last year, I mean, I've never been a big award junkie, to be honest. But you know, last year we won the best agency in the world from probably the most highly regarded you know, if you can say a highly regarded award show these days, called the DAND, which is
yeah.
And we won the best agency in the world. And you know, it was, I think none of it, when it happened, people were like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. It wasn't a game changer. We did it on the back of some just extraordinary work, a movement for stopping gun violence, which was really exceptional stuff. But, you know, look, we have I would say we've got 3 kind of chunks of clients at StrawberryFrog. We have health, wealth, and technology. So our clients kind of break down mostly in those spaces. We do have some, and then other. Steve mentioned, you know, we work with 4 of the larger health systems in the country. We work with several financial brands. Steve's mentioned a few. Visa. We did the whole Afterpay work before they were bought by Square. So we have a lot of finance, fintech experience, and then technology. And so as a result of that, you know, the worst place you want to be in today's market is a generalist, because nobody wants to buy in a generalist. Not that we're for sale, but as a result of having these 3 pillars, we do have a lot of buyers coming around offering to buy the agency. I would say probably once a week. And I think for the moment, you know, as long as Steve said the financials are strong, people sell agencies because they either hate the industry or they want to make a lot of money and leave. And I think there's still a passion, and there's still, you know, the people at StrawberryFrog make very good livings, and they have a good quality of life, and they're working on the kind of clients that they enjoy, and they're respected. And I think, as Steve said in his annual cultural evaluation of the teams, people come back and like to work here, and that's great. So no pressure to sell.
I think what's really unique about this moment in time, and you know, we all talk to marketing, you guys, your clients, your customers, CMOs that we hear from stages or presenting on panels, and they talk a lot about share of meaning replacing share of voice, with purpose and purpose-led marketing has been something that I think has become more accepted as a term, but maybe not as universally applied. But now that LLM, AEO, optimization, right? Like there is a challenge for getting noticed, getting clicks, getting conversions across the totality of all platforms at this point. How does a marketer, a CMO, one of your customers, balance that duality of really fighting the performance challenge versus staying true to what they believe, what they mean, and ultimately what I think their consumers want?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. The age old brand over time and sales overnight conundrum, right? How do you navigate that? And when you look at the emergence of things like AEO and GEO, there are some trends that emerge as well in terms of the platforms and the places that are over indexing on feeding those LLMs. So, Reddit, which had always been a popular forum and community for real people to give real opinions, has, I think, all of a sudden come to the forefront as just an absolute powerhouse because of the way that the LLMs over index on pulling anecdotes and information from Reddit as well. So I think what it's done is shift the prioritization of limited budgets. So what we really put a lot of emphasis on at Strawberry Frog, especially knowing that we've got creative and media both in-house, is comms planning. I think the rigor of comms planning and understanding the channels, the KPIs, the messages, and what each is meant to do, it becomes ever more important as the combination of those channels and networks and technologies change so quickly. So that comms plan needs to be a living, breathing document that's basically a decision rubric that helps ensure you hit your goals, you find your goals, and you get there.
Just to build on what Steve said, one of the things he did when he joined the company, which was brilliant, was he did a AI StrawberryFrog transformation. So instead of going out and starting to sell AI to clients, he brought in an AI expert who actually reinvented the way we do stuff at the company. So now everything, he's developed, they have Claude-based systems and processes. Everything is AI, which is actually quite extraordinary because I have had a conversation we have a couple of younger strategists and a couple of more established, experienced strategists. And the younger ones have picked up on this Claude-based strategic tool in a way that you would expect the young people to pick up because they're just, they don't have that much experience. So they're constantly hyper curious and they want to learn and so forth. And so as a result, everything has just gotten smarter. And and then the knock-on effect, of course, is that you can do brand in demand because everything is thought through this AI process where you can turn on certain things when needed. I think it's much smarter. It's a collapsing of the traditional, let's say, areas of expertise inside agencies. The old days when you had the demand guys were in the corner and the brand guys were the cool kids with the haircuts. And, now it's the same group and they have access to these really cool tools that bring them all together and let them kind of flex depending on the need.
So, getting a little personal now that we've gotten AI out of our systems here and talked about that for a bit, Scott, 35 years in, what piece of advice did you get early in your career that has been like a constant thread that you'd pass on to Steve, or maybe a piece of advice that you absolutely think is incorrect in today's world and should not be considered any longer?
I think, listen, there's words like gumption and perseverance. Those are always valuable. For me, it's like I have always believed in like, okay, next. Like, you do your best. Stuff is going to happen. The old alcoholics pledge. Things in your control, things outside of your control. And then when it happens, okay, next, and you move on and you learn. You take a moment, you try to learn from it, you make your change, and you move on. There's clearly things that are going to happen that you're going to scratch your head and say, maybe I should have done it a little faster, or maybe I should have gone a little slower. Maybe I could do a little better. Yeah, all those things are valuable. But if you beat yourself up too much, you're never going to be happy, and if you're not happy, you're not going to love what you do. So, okay, next to me is what I, hopefully pass on to Steve as a way of doing his work.
And Steve, is your key takeaway not to ever use the word gumption with people who've been working for less than 35 years? Because I don't even know what that means. That's my guess.
Grit.
Yes,
Grit.
Grit.
God, gumption, eh?
Grit. Yeah. Well, there's a funny story with gumption that when I started StrawberryFrog, and I remember I stood up in a meeting and there was a client, I can't remember who it was, it may have been Heineken. And I stood up in the room and I said, you should not do advertising. The Dutch they have this really funny sense of humor. So I stood up in the meeting with this whole board from Heineken and I said, you shouldn't do advertising. Advertising's dead. You need a movement. And then the CEO stood up and said, you mean a bowel movement? And I was like, And then I think my whole team after the meeting were like, I don't know if that word movement's really a good idea. I don't think it's going to work. And then I was like, I think it took me about a couple of days. And I was like, no, I think it's a good idea. We should keep on it. And it ended up being good. So gumption and perseverance did actually help in those days. But you shouldn't throw yourself.
When in doubt, throw it back to the Swedes and just say it was a cultural force that they invented. And then everyone will just trust it, right? Because everyone believes in anything Scandinavian.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you can all dance to ABBA, which everybody seems to be doing these days.
Look, even after this World Cup and the success the Norwegians had, I think there is a love affair happening globally with Scandinavia. Yeah. That I've always secretly wanted to move there just because everything seems better there, at least in terms of the statistical rankings. But the fact that you've taken that and infused it into what you do is and what you've built, I think is incredible. So we're going to end with some lightning round questions because that's what we do. The goal is not to put any AI into it or any long-standing foundational thought process and strategy. It's just what you feel.
You don't like aesthetic intelligence?
I don't know how to always interpret it. Okay. But that's, I want others to tell me what to believe. That's why I work in advertising and marketing. So
there you go. Moldable.
Yeah. But what I've learned about the two of you just in this conversation over the last, 30, 40 minutes or so is that there's a real relationship here. There's a real trust. It's not just a reporting line. That part of that has to happen and was forged in what you were doing together inside of work. But was there some sort of ritual? Like you said, you talk, maybe not every day, but how do you keep that real relationship alive beyond just the coach athlete sort of framework?
I think Scott invested in it early. When I was about 2 months on the gig, he took the entire leadership team to a very meaningful offsite where we all stayed in a house together. And, I'll give it to Scott. Everybody had their own bathroom, so he did it right. But we spent
movements. You were conscious of movements at that point.
Bowel movements will follow me my whole life.
That's right. So we spent meaningful time together outside the office. He brought his wife. I know both of his sons now, so I think making sure that this relationship is more than professional is a really easy way to make sure that we're both bringing a level of empathy to every conversation that we have when we're just talking to each other as two dudes who like hanging out just as much as we're talking about trying to, drive the finances of the business forward.
But I also think, Steve is a father. and a husband, and he has two younger children. And I think I try to respect that and not bother him when he's having dinner with his kids or when he's weekends. Like I think as much as it's about, oh, we go off and play golf together. No, it's about like mutual respect, just knowing who he is, what matters to him, and letting him enjoy that part of his life because it is probably it is the most important part of his life. And I think those things, respect, it's about mutual respect.
You both obviously are not just paying attention to the work being done within your agency. Scott, I'll ask you this first, but then Steve, I would love your opinion. From your vantage point now, as someone who can look more pervasively across the industry, is there a brand or a company doing genuinely great work right now that has nothing to do with your client roster that you have sort of either FOMO or professional jealousy or envy of?
Yeah, there's a really cool tech company in Sweden called Lovable, which just had like literally started 12 months ago and just did like huge multi-billion IPO. And they just have a really cool vibe about them, which to me is all about respect and cutting all the bullshit out, all the lingo, and I don't mean lingo as in business lingo. I mean like the lingo people have when they're trying to have a role in advertising or in strategy or in client talk. It just feels so fresh and honest. So I really admire those guys. It's not an agency.
Steve, what about you? Any professional jealousy you want to share?
I think it's there's one that I think hit its stride maybe about 9-12 months ago, which is really fun. Nutter Butter, like the way that they have like totally reinvented the way that they're using TikTok has just like I think changed the platform. So as new platforms continue to emerge, I think, and listen, it's easy when you're a candy brand or a peanut butter snack, but I think it just takes trust and instinct to turn your account over to a situation like that. And I think that type of bravery is commendable regardless.
Scott, as you go to dinner parties, what's cooler when you say it? You're a chairman or when we were a CEO? What's a better title?
I think chairman is cooler.
Yeah.
Because it suits the gray hair, which you can't probably see here, but it's kind of. I know you're sitting in your cozy rustic studio. It's hard to see the gray hair, but it's still there. And you've got to know when your past due date is. And not with all due respect, I don't mean I'm not ageist, but I do think I feel like I'm in a better place in the crow's nest than I am behind the captain's.
Just know that depending on what happens, I saw Titanic. Sometimes it's the guy in the crow's nest that takes the blame when the bad thing happens. So you're not fully escaping culpability.
Well, this is not a metal ship, though. This is a handmade authentic wooden 17th century Dutch vessel. So it's fine. It had his maiden voyage from Amsterdam. It's going to be fine. Can hit the rock.
You've been all over the world. You've survived every climate, every environment that you could possibly think of.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
What's the last or a recent movement, cultural or otherwise, that you've been personally swept up in? I want to end with that.
Is that a question for Steve?
Both of you, yeah.
That's interesting.
It's very easy to look at meta movements that are like sweeping the world. And I was absolutely blown away by how much of a world experience it was during the World Cup. And I think, we fool ourselves to believe what we read about in the newspapers, that the world is becoming a nationalistic globe. I actually think I think there's a huge movement for universality. I think people love to watch different cultures and countries and Africans and Europeans and Japan, and they come together and play, a bunch of grown men running after a ball on a spit-soaked field. And every 5 seconds, they're like, everybody's spitting all the time. But still, everybody goes crazy. And I just think there's this anti-nationalistic movement that's going to come out of the World Cup, where people are going to feel, you know what? It's a Small World, after all, was actually the best ride at Disney.
So true.
And the thing I'll add to that, Scott, is what.
Yeah, gauntlet laid down, and now passing the torch to you, Steve. So
yes.
Top that.
What's redeeming about the World Cup too is, I think, even seeing the way the world responded to their experience here. It's so easy to get caught up in the machine of the news, and really you could get down on the state of things. But when all these folks who hadn't experienced American culture and American cities before are just gushing about what it's been like, it's really nice perspective to remind ourselves, like, damn, all right, we do have it pretty good, huh?
We do have ranch.
Yes, exactly.
And a TSA that is an advocate that will support it.
That's right. Only to a certain size.
I think that idea of togetherness and kind of building these things together, both as something that you're doing, but also collectively, more holistically, is a great note to end on, and filling me with hope and inspiring me to go run out and do some good in the world. So I thank you for that. Thank you for your time together, and Scott, for what you've built and what you've contributed to our industry and ecosystem. Thank you. And Steve, no pressure to keep it going here.
Like Scott said, just we're rolling with it regardless. So I'm no pressure at all.
That handmade wooden boat, I love it.
Yeah,
Keep rowing.
No buckets here.
That's Norwegian. Sorry, I keep getting my countries confused.
The rowing, yeah. No, here you got to take apart and put together furniture in Sweden.
Hold on, let me get my little tiny Allen wrench.
Exactly. Yeah, which never comes
big things together. Yeah. Thank you guys, and
Thank you.
Continued success, and look forward to following the story as it continues to unfold.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Valerie.
That's Scott Goodson and Steve Scutellaro of StrawberryFrog. Subscribe to Snarketing wherever you listen, check out our merch, and catch the full library on YouTube. And of course, keep on snarking.